Washington, D.C. in the autumn of 1978 was a city of carefully constructed facades. The nation was nursing the lingering hangover of the last decade, a malaise of economic stagflation and a deep, systemic cynicism toward its own institutions. The Cold War, however, had not abated. It had simply gone indoors, burrowing into the beige offices of the federal bureaucracy, into the humming, tape-driven computers of the defense sector, and into the quiet, unassuming lives of the people who served them. The great ideological conflict was being waged not on battlefields, but in code, in policy papers, and in whispered conversations over lukewarm coffee in secure cafeterias. One such unassuming life belonged to Dr. Arthur Hayes. At 44, Arthur was a man defined by a quiet, almost monastic dedication to his work. He was a senior civilian analyst at the Omicron Group, a federally funded research and development center in Arlington, Virginia, that functioned as an auxiliary brain for the Department of Energy. His specialization was esoteric, yet vital: predictive modeling of advanced fissile materials under extreme stress. In layman's terms, he spent his days contemplating the precise, catastrophic mathematics of thermonuclear chain reactions. He was, in essence, one of a handful of men who truly understood the complex physics of the American nuclear deterrent. Arthur's life, outside of his classified work, was a study in routine. He lived in a modest duplex in Falls Church, a house that had grown silent and overly large since the passing of his wife, Eleanor, 3 years prior. He ate dinner at the same diner 3 nights a week. He attended classical music concerts at the Kennedy Center, always alone, and played chess in a small, dusty community hall on Thursdays. He was, by all accounts, a model of stability, a low-risk asset. His security clearance was pristine. He was cleared for Q, the DOE's equivalent of top secret, giving him access to the most sensitive restricted data. Watching men like Arthur Hayes was the job of men like Frank Miller. Miller was a senior agent in the FBI's Washington Field Office, Counterintelligence Division. He was not a man of action in the popular sense. He was a man of files, of patterns, of patience. His world was one of long-lens photography, of patient surveillance, of meticulously cross-referenced reports. He understood that espionage in the modern era was rarely about trench coats and hidden transmitters. It was about the slow, methodical exploitation of human systems. And human beings, he knew, were the most fallible system of all. Miller's current assignment was Project Sentry, a broad, proactive canvassing of foreign nationals, diplomats, trade attachés, journalists, and academics operating in the capital. It was tedious, preventative work, a search for the faint signals that might indicate a hostile intelligence operation was taking root. The target was the national security area. The prize was the data held in the minds and filing cabinets of men like Arthur Hayes. The players were already in place. The adversary, the KGB's first chief directorate, known as Directorate K, was patient, well-funded, and utterly ruthless. They were masters of the long game. And in the fall of 1978, their gaze was settling on the vulnerabilities not of a system, but of a man. The city was cooling, the leaves turning brittle, and the complex, invisible machinery of the great game was about to focus its undivided attention on one lonely, brilliant analyst. The Thursday evening chess club met in the basement of a public library, a room that smelled of floor wax and old paper. It was Arthur's one reliable social outlet, a place where the logic was pure and the interactions were governed by a strict set of rules. He was a competent, if uninspired, player. His game was cautious, defensive, built around minimizing risk. It was on a rainy evening in early October that he first saw her. She was sitting at a corner board playing a rapid game against Mr. Petrov, the club's cantankerous reigning champion. Arthur was struck by the intensity of her focus. She moved with a quick, decisive energy that was a stark contrast to the room's usual somnambulistic pace. When the game ended, Petrov astonishingly conceding with a frustrated sigh, she looked up, her gaze sweeping the room, and her eyes met Arthur's. She offered a small, almost apologetic smile. Later, as he was packing his pieces, she approached. "He does not like to lose that one," she said. Her voice was accented, a soft, melodic Slavic resonance that he couldn't immediately place. "No, he doesn't," Arthur replied, fumbling with the clasp on his wooden box. "You played a very aggressive game,
It is the only way, no? To wait for the other to make a mistake. It is too boring. She extended a hand. I am Anna. Anna Kozlova. Arthur Hayes, he said, taking her hand. It was firm and cool. They spoke for a few minutes. She explained, a cultural attaché from the Bulgarian embassy. She was studying American modernist art for a cultural exchange program. She found the DC art scene a little safe, but was fascinated by the museums.
She had joined the chess club to keep the mind sharp. Arthur, unaccustomed to such direct and intelligent conversation from a stranger, found himself disarmed. She asked him about his work, and he gave his standard, practiced reply. I work for a government contractor, mostly just boring policy analysis. Anna had nodded, her expression open. All government work is boring, I think. It is the same in my country. So much paper, so many meetings. Over the next few weeks, Anna became a regular fixture at the chess club. Their conversations expanded. They would leave the library together, walking the few blocks to the parking lot. She asked him about his life, and he found himself, to his own surprise, telling her. He spoke of Eleanor, of his work's consuming nature, of his feeling of being slightly out of step with the modern world. Anna listened. She listened with an empathy that felt like a balm. She spoke of her own supposed loneliness in a foreign capital, of the bureaucratic frustrations of her own embassy, of a shared feeling of being an intellectual adrift. A small warning bell, a distant chime of his security training sounded in Arthur's mind. Foreign national diplomatic cover. He was supposed to report such contacts. But what was there to report? A casual conversation over a chessboard? He was not a diplomat. He was not a military officer. He was a scientist. To file a report would be to invite scrutiny, to bring the gray, procedural world of security officers into this one small, bright part of his week. He dismissed the thought. It was paranoia. He was just a man having a conversation with a woman. One evening, she invited him to a small reception at an independent art gallery in Georgetown, where a friend of hers was showing work. It will be terrible wine and mediocre art, she'd said with a laugh, but the conversation might be good. Please come. Arthur, feeling a spark of something he hadn't felt in years, had said yes. The first, almost invisible thread had been laid. The gallery in Georgetown was called Galerie Nouveau, a narrow, whitewashed space that, as Anna had predicted, served truly terrible wine. The art was a collection of stark, vaguely unsettling sculptures. Arthur felt out of place in his tweed jacket, but Anna, seeing him hesitate at the door, took his arm. Arthur, I am so glad you came. Do not mind the art. It is trying too hard. Come, I will introduce you to no one. She steered him to a quiet corner, and for 2 hours they talked. She spoke of growing up in Sofia, of reading Dostoevsky, and secretly listening to American jazz on shortwave radio. She seemed to possess a genuine, searching curiosity, not just about him, but about his world. She asked about his work again, but this time with a different angle. Not what do you do, but what do you think? The mathematics you work with, she said, it must be very pure, like a form of art itself, to see the world in code. Arthur was flattered. Few people understood the elegance of his field. It's mostly just modeling. We run simulations. We try to predict how systems will behave. Systems, she repeated, tasting the word. It sounds so cold. But you are modeling energy, are you not? The very thing that makes the universe. It is philosophical, in a way. They began seeing each other outside of the chess club, a concert at the Kennedy Center, Brahms, which they both loved, a walk along the C&O Canal. Anna was a perfect companion, intelligent, emotionally resonant, and, most importantly, she seemed to require nothing from him but his company. The discovery, when it came, was not a thunderclap. It was a slow, creeping realization in a different, much colder building across the river. At the FBI's Washington field office, Agent Frank Miller's team was collating the week's surveillance logs. A junior analyst was flagging Pattern 7 contacts, foreign nationals from specified hostile embassies interacting with cleared U.S. personnel. Got a hit, boss, the analyst said, dropping a thin file on Miller's desk. Anna Kozlova, cultural attaché, Bulgarian embassy. Multiple contacts with a Dr. Arthur Hayes. Miller sighed. Bulgarian. That's just a pass-through for the second chief. What's Hayes's clearance? Q clearance. Department of Energy. He's an analyst at Omicron. Miller sat up. Omicron was not boring policy. Omicron was the tip of the spear. Multiple contacts? What's the venue? A chess club in Falls Church. Also, a gallery event in Georgetown, and 2 nights ago, the Kennedy Center. Social, then, Miller mused. Is she on anyone else's list? That's the thing. She's clean, minimal chatter. Sticks to cultural events. Her file's thin. She's only been in-country 4 months. A clean file for a Bulgarian attaché is a dirty file, Miller said, his instincts firing. She's not SVR, she's not GRU. She's Directorate K, an illegal or a deep cover officer using a diplomatic pouch. She's not here for the art. You think she's running an operation on Hayes? I think, Miller said, reaching for the phone, that we need to know what Mr. Hayes had for breakfast. Put a team on him. Eyes on 24/7, and get me a full workup on Koslova. I want to know her blood type. The discovery had been made, not by Arthur, who was lost in the fog of a newfound companionship, but by the gray, methodical men whose job it was to see the patterns he could not. 2 separate, unaware parties were now focused intently on Anna Koslova. One, with burgeoning affection. The other, with cold, professional suspicion. The surveillance began immediately, and it was, by design, invisible to its target. Frank Miller's team was composed of professionals, masters of the subtle, boring art of watching. 2 ghost cars, nondescript sedans, picked up Arthur's blue Chevrolet Nova as he left his duplex. A foot team, 2 men and a woman in civilian clothes, was waiting at the Omicron parking garage, noting his arrival time. Another team was already in place outside Anna Koslova's apartment building in Crystal City. Miller's first priority was a technical survey. We need his house, his car, and his office yesterday, he ordered. The office was impossible. A sensitive, compartmented information facility, a SCIF, that the Bureau couldn't touch without DOE's full and very loud cooperation. But the house and car were fair game. While Arthur was at work, an FBI black bag team, using a warrant signed by a FISA court judge, performed a sterile entry into his duplex. It took them less than 20 minutes. They photographed his desk, his nightstand, his bookshelves. They planted a miniature, low-frequency transmitter in his telephone, another in the base of a lamp in his living room, and a small audio recorder under the dashboard of his Nova. They were ghosts, leaving no trace but the faint, lingering scent of ozone. The tapes started rolling in, and Miller's team began the tedious process of transcribing Arthur's life. The first 48 hours were a bust, a call to his dry cleaner, a conversation with a wrong number, and hours of silence punctuated by the sound of classical music on his stereo. This is thrilling, Agent Sullivan, the team's junior member, muttered as he tagged another reel. This is the job, Miller replied, not looking up from a different transcript. The job is 99% boredom, 1% oh my god. The oh my god moment came on a Friday night. Arthur had Anna over to his home for dinner. The audio from the lamp transmitter was clear. It's a lovely home, Arthur, Anna's voice said. It's just a house. It was Eleanor's, really. She picked everything out. You miss her very much. A statement, not a question. A long pause, the sound of plates being set down. Every day, it's the quiet, I think. It's too quiet. I understand quiet, Anna said. Sometimes in my apartment the quiet is so loud, I think it will break the windows. Miller listened to the tape, a frown creasing his brow. She's good, he said to Sullivan. She's not pushing. She's matching his vulnerability. She's making him feel understood. The conversation continued for 2 hours. They discussed music, his work, in vague, safe terms, her frustrations with her embassy's cultural director. It was a portrait of 2 lonely, intelligent people finding common ground. Then, as she was preparing to leave, Anna said, "This project you are working on, the one that frustrates you, you said it was theoretical models?" "Ah, yes," Arthur's voice hesitant. "It's complex. We're trying to model particle dispersal in a very chaotic environment. The math isn't cooperating." "Particle dispersal?" Anna said, her voice light, curious, like dust in the wind. Something like that. Only the dust is, well, it's complicated. And the wind is a few million degrees. It's a fool's errand, probably. I don't think you are a fool, Arthur. I think you are a brilliant man doing work no one else can. Thank you, Anna. That means a lot. The sound of the front door opening and closing. Miller hit the stop button on the recorder. He looked at Sullivan. Particle dispersal. Chaotic environment. A few million degrees. He's talking about MERV warhead fratricide. He's talking about the core of our nuclear strike capability. He didn't give her anything, Sullivan argued. It was just talking. He gave her a beachhead, Miller said, his voice hard. He confirmed his access, his field of study, and his emotional state. He just told her how to ask for the secrets without ever saying a word. She's not just a honey trap, Sullivan. She's a trained technical intelligence officer. She knows exactly what she's hearing. The surveillance was no longer passive. It was now a high-priority containment operation. Miller's team began a deep background search on Anna Koslova, sending her prints and photo to liaisons in London, Paris, and West Berlin. The net was tightening, but the prey was unaware, and the hunter was moving with lethal precision. The escalation, when it came, was masterful. It arrived not as a demand, but as a crisis of Anna's own. For nearly a month, the FBI team had listened to the relationship deepen. Arthur and Anna were now a couple, albeit a quiet, middle-aged one. They attended concerts, they cooked dinner, they talked for hours. Arthur's entire demeanor had changed. He seemed lighter, happier. The surveillance team noted he had started humming on his way to work. The confrontation was not with an adversary, but with Arthur's own, carefully guarded principles. It happened on a Tuesday night. Anna arrived at Arthur's duplex, unannounced, in a state of visible distress. The microphone in the lamp captured the sound of her shivering, the tremor in her voice. "Anna, what's wrong? You're soaked." "Arthur, I am so sorry to come like this. I did not know where else to go." Come in. My God, what happened?" She allowed him to lead her to the sofa. She held a large manila envelope clutched to her chest. It is my embassy," she said, her voice a low whisper. "The new cultural director. He is not a good man. He is from the old way of thinking. He has been suggestive." In the FBI surveillance van parked a block away, Miller and Sullivan exchanged a look. "Here we go," Miller said. "Phase 2. He made advances," Anna continued, her voice breaking. "I refused him. Now he is threatening me. He says I am too friendly with Americans. He says he will write a report, that I am ideologically suspect. Arthur, you know what that means. They will recall me. My family. It will be very bad for them. He wants me to be his mistress." Arthur's voice was filled with a protective rage. That's monstrous. We have to report him. To your ambassador. To the State Department. "No," Anna's voice was sharp. "You don't understand. That would be worse. It would make it political. It would prove his point. I would be a traitor, and he would be a patriot defending his staff from a Western agent." He held up this. She tapped the manila envelope. "This is my research. My work on my art dissertation. It is months of work. He said it was politically weak, and that he would confiscate it. I took it from his office when he was gone. I ran. Arthur, I am so frightened. You're safe here, Anna. He can't get you here. But my work, it is all I have. He will say I stole it. He will ruin me. I have a backup copy, on microfilm." She produced a small fingernail-sized canister. "A friend at the university gave it to me. But I have no way to read it, no way to print it. I need to make a copy, a paper copy, to prove it is my work, to send to my professor in Sofia, to protect myself." She was crying now, soft, controlled sobs. "A copy," Arthur said, his mind working. "We can go to a copy shop." "No, not safe. His people. They watch me. I am sure of it. I cannot go out." "Arthur, I know you cannot, but at your work, you have printers? Copy machines?" The surveillance van was silent. "And there it is," Miller whispered. The ask. Arthur's voice was strained. Anna, my work. It's a secure facility. I can't just bring things in. It's my clearance. My whole life. I know, she whispered. I know. It is too much. I am sorry. I will go. She stood up. No, wait. Arthur's mind was racing. His security training, his deep-seated sense of duty, was at war with the image of the terrified woman before him. She wasn't asking for secrets. She was asking for help. A simple humanitarian act, to use a copy machine. What harm could it do? The documents, he said, his voice low. Your dissertation. It's just art history. Yes, it is on American abstract expressionism. Rothko, Pollock. Nothing political. I swear to you, Arthur. He looked at her tear-streaked face. He looked at the small canister. It was a confrontation with himself. His entire career was built on following the rules. But his life with Anna, it was the first time he had felt alive in years. To refuse would be to send her back to that man. It was a small-scale, personal, moral crisis. Tomorrow, he said, his voice barely audible. They are lax on the security checks for exit. We check our own briefcases. If I bring in the microfilm, I can use the library printer. It's not on the secure network. It's just for journals. Arthur, would you? You would do that for me? I will, he said, his decision made. I will help you. In the van, Miller switched off the feed. He's hooked. He's rationalized it. He's no longer a victim, Sullivan. He's now an active, if unwilling, participant. What do? We can't let him take that film in. No, Miller said, his face grim. We can't. The confrontation is over. Now, the exposure begins. The word arrest was not one Frank Miller liked to use. It was imprecise. What he was planning for Arthur Hayes was a controlled exposure. The objective was not to punish, but to contain, assess, and, if possible, salvage. But first, he had to stop the breach. The next morning, the surveillance on Arthur was suffocatingly tight. 2 agents sat in a parked utility van near his duplex. When Arthur emerged, carrying his briefcase, they noted he looked pale and had not slept. He did not, however, have the manila envelope or the small canister. He's clean, the surveillance leader radioed to Miller. He didn't take the film. Miller, in his office, felt a twinge of relief. Did she leave last night? Negative. She's still in the house. He's driving her to her embassy now. No, he isn't, Miller said. He's going to make the drop. She's given him the film. It's on him. He's just better than we thought. Miller knew instinctively that Arthur wouldn't risk carrying the microfilm in his briefcase. It would be in his pocket, in his sock. Somewhere simple. Box him. It was a standard 2-car box, a technical maneuver. As Arthur's Chevrolet Nova turned onto Key Bridge, a blue sedan in front of him slowed down abruptly, as if to make a turn, then stalled. A beige station wagon pulled up behind Arthur, close to his bumper, a second sedan pulling alongside him in the left-hand lane. He was trapped. Arthur, already on edge, gripped the steering wheel. He saw a man get out of the car in front, a man in a simple business suit. The man walked back to Arthur's car. He didn't look like a mechanic. He looked official. Arthur instinctively rolled down his window. Is there a problem? The man, Agent Sullivan, flashed a badge. Dr. Arthur Hayes, FBI. We need you to come with us, sir. Please, turn off your vehicle and step out. Arthur's world, which had been tilting, went into a freefall. This wasn't about a stalled car. This was about him. The blood drained from his face. What is this about? Please, sir, step out of the car. We can discuss this in a more private setting. Another man from the car behind had already opened Arthur's passenger door. Ma'am, we need you to come with us as well. Anna Kozlova's face was a mask of confusion and, was it amusement? No, that couldn't be right. They were separated. Arthur was put in the back of one car, Anna in another. The operation was slick, professional, and terrifyingly public. Horns were blaring. The stalled car magically started, and the flow of traffic resumed, swallowing the incident as if it had never happened. Arthur was taken not to the WFO, but to a safe location. A sterile, anonymous room in a government-leased office building in Rosslyn. The room contained a table and 3 chairs. The walls were a pale, institutional green. Frank Miller was waiting for him. He did not rise when Arthur was shown in. "Dr. Hayes, please sit. Would you like some coffee? Where is Anna? What is going on? I demand to speak to a lawyer. You are not under arrest, Dr. Hayes. You are here for a debriefing. As for Ms. Kozlova, she is answering some questions of her own, though I suspect her answers will be less than truthful." Miller slid a file across the table. It was thin. Arthur opened it. Inside was a photograph. A surveillance photo, grainy but clear. It showed Anna Kozlova, 2 days prior, sitting on a park bench in Rock Creek Park, handing an envelope to a man. I don't understand," Arthur stammered. "That," Miller said, pointing, "is Colonel Dmitry Volkov. He is the KGB resident at the Soviet embassy. He is, for all intents and purposes, the chief of espionage for this city. The man your friend was reporting to." He slid another photo, this one of Anna, entering her apartment building. The date stamp was from 2 years ago. This is her in West Berlin. Her name then was Captain Yelena Petrova, First Chief Directorate, Department V Illegals. She is not a Bulgarian cultural attaché, Dr. Hayes. She is a full-time state-sponsored intelligence officer, and her target was you. Arthur looked at the photos. He looked at Miller's impassive, tired face. The details, the small inconsistencies of his time with Anna, rushed into his mind. Her perfect, almost unaccented English, her accidental knowledge of technical terms, her loneliness that so perfectly mirrored his own. Her dissertation, Arthur whispered. The microfilm. Ah, yes, the microfilm, Miller said. He reached into his pocket and produced a small plastic evidence bag. Inside was the canister. We, borrowed your jacket from your office coat rack for a moment this morning while you were in a meeting. Found this in the lining. Our technicians took a look. It's not art history, Doctor. Miller slid a final 8:10 glossy photo across the table. It was a blown-up image from the microfilm. It was not a Rothko. It was a complex, multi-page mathematical formula. Recognize it? Miller asked, his voice flat. Arthur's stomach heaved. It was a page from his own notebook, a theoretical formula he had been working on. He had left his notebook open on his desk at home one evening, when Anna was there. She photographed my work, he whispered, the exposure complete. It was not the FBI who had exposed him. It was Anna. He had exposed himself, his entire world, his country's secrets, for a phantom. Yes, Miller said. And she was about to have you, her cleared Q-level asset, personally courier, a new set of instructions into a secure facility, using your own dissertation as a cover. She wasn't just exfiltrating data, Doctor. She was turning you into a willing, functioning agent. The arrest was not physical. It was the complete, catastrophic apprehension of his own, profound and devastating foolishness. The interrogation of Arthur Hayes lasted for 72 hours. It was not a trial by jury, but a trial by procedure. It was a meticulous, soul-crushing dissection of the last 6 months of his life. The pale green room became his world. Agents came and went in shifts. Miller was the constant, his presence a heavy judicial weight in the room. There was no violence, no shouting. The weapon of choice was the polygraph, which he was asked to take, and which he failed, spectacularly. The machine's needles danced with his anxiety, his shame, his lingering, betrayed affection. Let's go over it again, Arthur, Miller would say, his voice a monotone. The dinner, October 28th. You mentioned particle dispersal. Tell me your exact words. I don't remember. We were talking about dust in the wind. It was a metaphor. We are not interested in metaphors, Dr. Hayes. We are interested in specifics. What specific data did you discuss? Did you mention the 7A algorithm? Did you mention the problems with the guidance package? Did you mention the word fratricide? No, never. I would never. I just said it was complex. Another agent would enter, holding a transcript. At 21:47, you said, "The wind is a few million degrees." Dr. Hayes, is that not a specific reference to the yield of a thermonuclear device? It was poetry, Arthur whispered, knowing how feeble it sounded. The KGB does not recruit poets, Doctor. It recruits assets. They made him account for every minute. They played back the tapes from his home. He was forced to listen to his own voice, foolish and trusting. He had to listen to Anna's voice, now revealed as a hollow, calculated performance. He had to hear his own betrayal, spoken in his own words. It was a form of psychological torture, a forced feedback loop of his own failure. The trial was the damage assessment. While Arthur was being debriefed, a second team from the FBI and the DOE was tearing his life apart. They were in his home, in his office. They inventoried every book, every paper. The report they were compiling was not for a court of law, but for the National Security Council. What did she get? Miller asked him on the third day. Arthur was exhausted, unshaven, his suit rumpled. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. She photographed my notebook. What was in the notebook? Theories, just equations, nothing concrete, not blueprints. Dr. Hayes, Miller said, leaning forward. Stop, we are past that. Your theories on MERV dispersal patterns and yield calculations are 5 years ahead of anything the Soviets have. You didn't give her a blueprint. You gave her the entire architectural plan. You gave her the why, not just the what. She didn't steal a bomb. She stole the math that makes the bomb work. Arthur put his head in his hands. The full weight of his actions, his inaction, settled on him. He had not just been a fool. He had been a danger. He had compromised the very deterrent he had spent his life working to maintain. The final stage of the trial was the disposition. On the fourth day, a man in a dark, expensive suit, who did not introduce himself, entered the room. Miller, for the first time, looked differential. Dr. Hayes, the man said, his voice crisp, you have committed a grave error, one that would, under other circumstances, lead to your prosecution for espionage. You have, in effect, betrayed your country. I know, Arthur said, his voice gone. However, the man continued, a public trial is problematic. It would expose the very data we wish to protect. It would create a public scandal and damage the morale of the intelligence community. And, most importantly, the other party, Ms. Kozlova, is no longer in our jurisdiction. Arthur looked at Miller, confused. She was traded, Miller said, his face unreadable. She was on a plane to Vienna 2 hours after we picked her up. We had an asset in East Berlin they wanted back. She was a high-value piece. They were happy to make the exchange. So, she wins, Arthur said, a bitter laugh escaping him. She completed her mission, the man in the suit corrected. There are no winners, only outcomes. Your outcome is this. You will resign from the Omicron group, effective immediately, for personal health reasons. Your Q clearance is permanently revoked. You will sign a lifetime non-disclosure agreement binding you to silence on this matter. You will not speak of Anna Kozlova, of Frank Miller, or of this room, to anyone, ever. In exchange, you will not be prosecuted. You will be forgotten. Do you understand? It was not a question. It was a verdict. Arthur Hayes, a brilliant mind who had held the nation's most profound secrets, was being sentenced to oblivion. He nodded. The trial was over. The aftermath was a study in silence. Arthur Hayes vanished from the Washington, D.C. landscape. His colleagues at Omicron were told he had suffered a severe nervous breakdown and had retired to live with relatives in the Midwest. A cleaner team from an unnamed agency sanitized his duplex, removing the bugs, and it was put on the market by a holding company. The file on Dr. Arthur Hayes was stamped closed, classified, and buried in a secure vault. Arthur, stripped of his name, his career, and his identity, moved to a small town in rural Ohio. He changed his name, taking his mother's maiden name, and became Arthur Pierce. He found a job as a high school algebra teacher. His brilliance, once applied to the physics of Armageddon, was now used to explain quadratic equations to indifferent teenagers. He lived in a small, rented apartment above a hardware store. He did not own a phone. He did not attend concerts. He did not play chess. He was a ghost, haunted by the memory of a woman who never existed. The personal tragedy was complete. He had lost everything, not to a hostile act, but to a calculated act of kindness. In Moscow, there was a different kind of aftermath. Anna Koslova, or rather Major Yelena Petrova, was debriefed at the KGB's Yasenevo headquarters. Her trial was a celebration. She was awarded the Order of the Red Banner. Her superiors were astonished at the richness of the data. The photographs from Arthur's notebook were a quantum leap, confirming their own theories and saving them, as Miller had predicted, years of research and billions of rubles. The equations allowed them to recalibrate the targeting computers for their new generation of SS-18 missiles, making their first strike capability infinitely more credible. Yelena's victory was total. She was promoted to lieutenant colonel and reassigned to train a new generation of illegals. She never spoke of Arthur. He was not a person. He was a target, an objective, a line item in a successful operation. The political paranoia that she had so expertly manipulated in him was, for her, simply a professional tool, like a lockpick or a wiretap. For Frank Miller, the aftermath was a quiet, bureaucratic victory that felt like a defeat. He had closed the case. He had prevented a worse breach. He had identified a major hostile agent. But the damage was done. The secrets were gone. He had been forced to trade the perpetrator for an East German dissident, a political move that left a sour taste in his mouth. The system had worked, but it had failed. He spent the next decade staring at surveillance photos, hunting for the next Anna, forever wondering which of the lonely, brilliant men in his city would be the next Arthur. The moral ambiguity of his work, of protecting a nation by destroying its citizens, settled on him like a permanent chill. The years passed. The Cold War, which had seemed like a permanent, immutable state of being, began to crack. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, that great physical symbol of the ideological divide, was reduced to rubble. The world was changing, and the old game was changing with it. Frank Miller, now retired from the Bureau, was living in a small condo in Florida, trying to lower his golf handicap. In 1991, with the final collapse of the Soviet Union, the floodgates opened. Files that had been locked in the darkest archives of the KGB were suddenly, and briefly, available. A new cash-strapped Russian government was willing to share, for a price. Miller, acting as a consultant for a U.S. government Truth and Reconciliation Commission, was given access to a trove of Directorate K files. He searched for one name. Operation Lyra, the file was called. He opened it, and there she was, Yelena Petrova. The file detailed her entire career. It was chillingly thorough. Her recruitment from the Moscow Institute for International Relations, her training, her first posting in West Berlin. And then, Operation Lyra, the American operation. Her target, Arthur Hayes. The file confirmed everything Miller had suspected, and more. It praised her psychological emotional handling of the asset, her masterful exploitation of target's personal vulnerabilities. It contained her own field notes. Asset A, Hayes, is highly intelligent but emotionally isolated, she had written. He responds to intellectual flattery and perceived vulnerability. The loneliness vector is the key. The file had one final entry. In 1988, during Gorbachev's purges of hardline KGB elements, Colonel Yelena Petrova had been arrested. She was accused of anti-Soviet agitation, aka being on the wrong side of a political power struggle. She was stripped of her rank and pension and retired to a small one-room flat in a crumbling Moscow suburb. The great game had consumed its own. As for Arthur Hayes, his legacy was silence. He had lived out his days as Mr. Pierce, the quiet algebra teacher. He passed away in his sleep in 1990 from a heart complication. His few possessions were sold at auction. No one at his small funeral knew his real name. No one knew he had once held the fate of the world in his brilliant, broken mind. He was a footnote in a file that Miller, alone, had read. The legacy of the operation was not a plaque on a wall, but a lost, stolen future. History, when it is written, tends to focus on the grand, sweeping movements, the fall of empires, the clash of ideologies, the treaties signed by great men. But the Cold War, in its essence, was a conflict of a different nature. It was a war of the interior, a struggle fought in the quiet, hidden spaces, in secure computer labs, in anonymous hotel rooms, and in the shadowed landscapes of the human heart. The story of Arthur Hayes and Yelena Petrova was not an anomaly. It was the system functioning as designed. It was a political structure that weaponized the most basic human needs, for connection, for understanding, for love, and turned them into tools of statecraft. Yelena, the hunter, was as much a product of her system as Arthur, the victim, was of his. She, too, was ultimately discarded by the mechanism she had served so perfectly. The true moral ambiguity of the era lay in this. Both sides, in their quest for security, created a world of profound and pervasive paranoia. Arthur was not just betrayed by a woman. He was betrayed by his own loneliness, a vulnerability that his own society, with its focus on individualism and secrecy, had done little to alleviate. Frank Miller, the protector, was forced to use methods of deception and psychological manipulation that were, in their own way, as corrosive as the enemy's. He had to destroy Arthur's life in order to save the data. In the end, there was no clear victory. Secrets were stolen, but the act of stealing them set in motion a chain of events that ultimately led to the thief's own ruin. A man's life was systematically dismantled, his contribution erased, all in the name of a national security that had failed to protect him. The Great Game was, in reality, a tragedy, a vast, impersonal machine that chewed up the lives of individuals and spat them out as classified files. The legacy is not one of good versus evil, but of a time when the world's most powerful nations decided that the human soul was, itself, a viable and legitimate battlefield. We hope this story offered a glimpse into the complex and often hidden side of history. Thank you for your time. If you wish to support our channel and see more content like this, a subscription is always appreciated.